This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
Hello, happy Friday. We are back, and this man next to me is back as well.
Yes, after being away far too long, but it's been wonderful to listen to the broadcasts and all those wonderful guests that you had on who stepped in to take my place more than admirably. Many would say did a far better job. So yeah, it was great. What a wonderful time. You had a marvellous time up in Morecambe.
I did. Yeah,
and we've just been talking about it, haven't we?
We have, yes. Great festival. Very much looking forward to going back to Morecambe and Vice again next year. I think they're looking at the 12th and 13th of September next year, and they have asked us to come back.
Well, yes. Well, it's coming back because I did go the year before.
No, I mean they asked us to come back and do this.
Oh,
yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, that's very kind of them. You'd have thought they'd have learnt by now.
I know.
But there we go. Well, it's lovely to be back. I have been in my own particular tunnel, not a Brexit tunnel, a theatre tunnel.
Yes, you've been knobbing about in Windsor.
I have, yes, looking up and seeing if the Queen's in, and she is regularly. It's her favourite palace, apparently.
Oh.
You know, I was having this conversation with my daughter the other day. She said, "But it's a castle." I said, "Well, it's a royal palace, but it's Windsor Castle, but it is a royal palace." If you're interested in such things, which I'm not entirely sure I am, actually. But there we are.
You are currently doing an Alan Ayckbourn down there, aren't you?
Yes, I am, and we've been talking about this because you have your theatre shenanigans throughout the year as well, where you do your acting and your directing in the same way that I do my acting, but I don't do any directing. And
I wouldn't recommend it.
And yes, I'm at the beginning of just finished a 3-week rehearsal period and opened at the Theatre Royal Windsor in Alan Ayckbourn's wonderful play 10 Times Table, which I'm doing my level best not to muck up. It's a wonderful company, and it's a great play and very demanding. It has nothing to do with crime whatsoever, other than the crimes that are normally committed on committees, because it's all set in a small market town. And a group of people who are trying to put on a pageant celebrating an historical event of the 18th century. And Ayckbourn's eye and ear is incredibly in tune with things, although this play was written in 1976. And our director, the wonderful Robin Herford, who's Sir Alan Ayckbourn's main ambassador, I think, for directing his plays worldwide, was in the original production, so he knows of what he speaks. But it's a wonderful. Nothing much has changed. You take a look at the political situation now, and you realise that it's there. It was exactly the same sort of things that are going on now with Brexit and things in this little committee. In a small market town in Buckinghamshire, as portrayed by Ayckbourn. So I think the audiences are enjoying it, hopefully on many levels, but on one of them being the fact that they go, "Oh my goodness, nothing's really changed."
I mean, there is definitely a crime link in that play, in that there is a best-selling crime writer in the lead role. I would argue that's quite a more than tenuous crime link.
Oh, okay, yeah, that'll do. That'll get me around the country. But anyway, yes, I will be happily. I like touring. People say, "Well, don't you prefer being in the West?" And I say, "Well, the West End. I do like being in the West End occasionally, but I'd much prefer to tour." I may have mentioned this before because you get to see the country. Logistically, it can be a bit demanding at times, but you get to visit all sorts of different places, and every Monday you open a new town or city, and you've got a new first night. And I also find that audiences who come to regional theatres, they're there. They really want to come to the theatre, and certainly when you're playing theatres like Bath and Lyceum at Sheffield and Newcastle and Malvern and Brighton, and these sort of theatres, they're great. They're hugely well supported, and they're a joy to play. And many of them being good old-fashioned Frank Matcham theatres, beautiful pieces of architecture. So it's a joy to do. I only do it once every 2 years, and that's enough for me, and it's probably enough for anyone coming to see me as well. So there we are.
Well, my only news this week is that these landed on my doorstep this morning.
My God.
It's the Italian translation of my book, Her Last Tomorrow. Do you want to read out the title, Bob?
Adam Croft, Un normale giorno di porra, un grande thriller, Adam Crofty.
It's a grande thriller. So yeah, if you speak Italian,
sorry,
that's our new theme tune. So yeah, if you do speak Italian, then yeah, you might want to.
Can I actually hold it?
Yeah.
What I love is the cover. You can't see this, listeners. There's a cover of a man who, in a pair of jeans and a sort of raincoat or whatever. But the house is very, very English, isn't it? That's not Italian architecture at all. So they've actually just saying, you pick up this book and you go, this is set in the UK, as indeed it is. But oh, this is very good. What does it say? One Nick. Le combinazione di pane bruciato e caffè vecchio non è mai stato la mia preferita, ma mi si sto abituando.
Yes, I remember vividly writing that sentence.
That's that's your opening section. Absolutely wrecked. Everyone who speaks Italian or is Italian will be come round. If you're in the company of Italian, you speak Italian well, you're probably feeling a bit queasy after that. Terrible rendition of the first lines of. Although
I did open the first page, and I thought maybe I'd opened it on the author's biography, because as you can see, the last two words on that page are di fatto. But yes, it's in this kind of odd European style of it being a paperback essentially, but with this kind of folded in cover. So you have the almost like the hardback wraparound cover, but on the paperback.
I quite like that. That's quite a nice touch. But is it interesting actually having a book that you've written that you can't read?
Yeah. Although I've got a little more chance with this one, because in the coming days I'm expecting to receive a few copies of Tell Me I'm Wrong in Korean. In which case I will stand absolutely no chance of even being able to read it out. So you just kind of you look at them and you hope that the translation is faithful and is okay, but you've got absolutely no way of knowing whatsoever. You just kind of your life is in their hands, really. So. Well,
one thing you can't argue with, the one thing that translates to all languages is the 5 stars on the front of this book.
Or 10
quote,
stars, technically.
Una tensione continua. Even I know what that means. The tension continues. What's this? Il finale è cardiopalma.
Cardiopalma. Is that something to do with the heart? A heart-stopping finale, maybe?
Incredible BBC News. There we are. That could be anything. Leggendo sembra proprio di vedere un film mozzafiato.
Not a clue.
I haven't got a clue.
No, but it does sound very nice. Listen, we need to do this, don't we?
Oh, yes. That sounds very
Italian. Does that sound?
It does sound very Italian, doesn't it? There we are. Well, there we are. That's you translated, published, and dealt with in Italian, with some very poor Italian spoken by the Doors. I am of Italian blood, may I say?
Are you?
Not that you'd have guessed in the last.
Is that all the
minutes.
Coffee you drink? Is that what it is?
It's the coffee. No, I have Italian blood in me.
Ah.
Yes. Yeah, the Bianchis.
Better give that back.
The whites actually sounds quite so.
Oh yeah, Bianchi, yes, yeah. Bianchi white, yeah.
Bianchi, the Bianchis. Yeah. So there we are, to all my relatives in Italy. If you're listening to this, which I can absolutely guarantee,
I think they'd have switched off when you were trying to read out the Italian.
Yes, they would have entirely disowned me. Anyway, there we go. So let's crack on. Have you got any news and views vis-a-vis and regarding?
I have.
The
now,
world
we are a broad
fiction.
church when it comes to crime, and we talk about real life crime. And something I saw in the news, which I wasn't expecting to talk about on Partners in Crime, but it is crimey, definitely. Wayne Rooney, the the ex-England footballer, his wife Colleen, is a heavy user of Instagram, and she was noticing that things that she was posting on her private Instagram stories, which are only for her friends, were making their way into newspapers. And she thought, this is quite odd, because this is not actually open to the public, and journalists can't see this stuff, so somebody is sending these stories. She decided to turn sleuth recently, and have you not seen this in the newspapers?
I haven't.
Oh, it's brilliant. She it was the Sun who were getting these stories, and she wanted to work out who was doing it. So she gradually started to whittle down who had access to her Instagram stories, who could see them. She was blocking people from seeing them one by one. until it was down to one person, and the stories kept going to the Sun. And there were 2 or 3 stories that she leaked. She actually leaked fake stories as well, things about her house flooding and things that just didn't happen. She put on these Instagram stories, and they made their way into the Sun newspaper, and only one person had access to that, and only one person had ever seen those Instagram stories, and that was a woman called Rebecca Vardy, who is married to Jamie Vardy, who is Wayne Rooney's England teammate. And Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy were, up until then, pretty good friends. Yeah.
Gosh, so what's happening now then?
Well, she claims it wasn't her. She said other people have access to her Instagram account. Presumably she's got, personal assistants and things like that. So she claims it wasn't her. The hashtag WAGatha Christie started trending on Twitter, of course, which is an amalgamation of Agatha Christie's name and WAGs, the acronym for Wives and Girlfriends of Professional Footballers, which made me chuckle. And The Sun commented and said, like all reputable media organisations, we don't comment on sources.
Well, no, I bet they don't.
Well, that's fairly criminal, the fact that The Sun are calling themselves a reputable media organisation. But that's a story for another time.
That's it. Now, all of a sudden... Adam, are you all right? You're looking a little pale. Well, how my Instagram's sort of turning up on Sun Online, and I don't understand who could do it. I say it's not my wife.
Well, if pictures of my cat start turning up in the Sun, then frankly, I don't think I'd even notice. But that was really. I thought that was a fascinating real life crime, I guess, or somebody you wouldn't expect to turn sleuth, turning sleuth. And I thought it was an absolutely ingenious way of rooting out where these leaks were coming from.
Well, so, WAGatha Christie, it was worth it for the WAGatha Christie alone. But I'm sure that'll end up in a book. Written by Adam Croft, and probably available in Serbian and Latvian and what have you. Right. Okay. So listen, I'm going to start off with the TV because fascinating documentary which I saw this week, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I'm sure many people with a bent towards crime fiction probably would have watched it too. It's called Sherlock Holmes Against Conan Doyle. Which is, I think it's all in the name, really. It explains the whole thing. It's basically about the struggle that Conan Doyle had with the success of Sherlock Holmes, and the fact that he thought that the popularity of Sherlock Holmes and the fact that publishers and what have you weren't interested in anything else he wrote meant that his greater literary gifts remained unexpressed, although he did write a couple of supposedly very fine historical novels. So although Sherlock Holmes was by far Arthur Conan Doyle's most famous creation, he tried and ultimately failed to distance himself from Sherlock mania. Sherlock Holmes Against Conan Doyle brings to light the struggle the writer had, I'm just repeating myself now, but in better English, had with trying to escape the mania caused by the public's fascination with the character Sherlock Holmes. Beginning with A Study in Scarlet, published in 1887, Doyle would write 4 novels and more than 50 short stories featuring Holmes and his sidekick, Dr. It says James Watson here, Dr. John Watson. Frustrated with not having enough time to work on other genres, Doyle tried creative measures to reduce his publishers' demand for more Holmes. He tried raising his asking price to such an absurd amount that they would have to refuse him, but to his surprise, they were willing to pay those large sums. Eventually, Doyle killed off Holmes in the short story The Final Problem in 1893. This reprieve would be short-lived, however, as public outcry forced him to write another Holmes novel in 1901. All things we know, but the documentary is absolutely fascinating. great clips. I had no idea that so many actors, for instance, have played Sherlock Holmes. I mean, we've got the obvious. We've got Jeremy Brett. We've got
not Jeremy Corbyn, as you were trying to remember his name before we started recording.
I think Jeremy Corbyn would make an absolutely lousy Sherlock Holmes.
Although better than Jeremy Beadle.
The late great. But and who else was it? How many Sherlocks can you actually name? Jeremy Brett,
Jeremy Clarkson,
Mr. Cumberbatch, of course. Jeremy Clarkson. I didn't realise that
Jeremy Hunt.
Jeremy Hunt. They don't have to be Jeremy.
No,
I mean they can be Basil.
Does help.
We've got Basil Rath, but I didn't realise that Roger Moore played it.
Did he?
And so did Michael Caine.
Wow, okay.
And Christopher Plum. I mean, the number of people who've portrayed the Great Sleuth is seemingly endless. But anyway, it's a terrific documentary. I think you can catch it. I think it's Sky, isn't it? I should know that by now. But it's look it up and you will find it. Sherlock Holmes against Conan Doyle. Even if you're not interested in crime, if you're not, might be very surprised that you're listening to this in the first place. But if you fancy that, it's got a new approach to analysing the relationship of the great author with his great fictional detective. Some fascinating insights, and will pass an hour and 5 minutes very happily indeed.
Well, I was reading the Otago Daily Times, as I do every day, cover to cover.
Of course you do.
And there was an article about Val McDermid in that. What do you know?
Hurrah.
Just happened to come across that during my daily read of the Otago Daily Times. But I mentioned that Scotland's Queen of Crime, Val McDermid, may be on the other side of the world to her homeland here in Dunedin, but the city's street names and Gothic look made her feel right at home. It's a lovely article, actually, about how Dunedin in New Zealand, which is where Val McDermid currently is, as visiting Professor of Scottish Studies and Crime Fiction at the University of Otago. She's spending 8 weeks there this year, and also 2020 and 2021. And how it actually feels very familiar and not dissimilar to the parts of the world that she's familiar with in Scotland. And she went in this article, in this interview with Brenda Harwood, talking about crime fiction and how it's enjoyed a long tradition of using a sense of place. She said, everybody knows that murders are not solved the way we write about them in real life, so when our readers pick up a crime novel, they enter into a kind of contract to suspend disbelief. Anything we can do that strengthens that is good, so writing about recognisable places is a part of that. And she goes on to mention that essentially she feels very at home over there in New Zealand, which is wonderful. And she spoke last week at the Celtic Noir Festival at the Dunedin City Library with fellow authors Liz Nugent, Adrian McKinsey and Liam McElvenney. So there we go.
Our friend Craig Sisterton will know everything about that. Have you ever been to New Zealand? I'd love to go.
I haven't.
Love to go.
No,
I really would. I would. I've heard so much about it, and it's from what I see, it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world.
Yeah, it does look it. Absolutely, yeah. And the other thing I spotted in the news, we've mentioned pretty much weekly now for months, that every website wants to tell us what to read, and Barnes & Noble are no different, but they probably should tell us what to read because they actually sell the books, so they probably know what they're talking about. They have listed their best thrillers of October 2019. I'll give you a quick rundown of what they reckon you should be reading. The Guardians by John Grisham, Blue Moon by Lee Child, The Night Fire by Michael Connolly, The Deserter by Nelson DeMille and his son Alex DeMille, Bloody Genius, a book about me by John Sanford, Agent Running in the Field by John le Carré, Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky, I hope, The Butterfly Girl by Renee Denfeld, and Stealth by Stuart Woods. And that was the recommendations of Barnes & Noble. Marvellous. There we are. That's it. Yes, Paul Gambaccini, eat your heart out. Very good if you managed to get any of those. Now, my writer of the week, and there's a tie-in here because it's a television adaptation and it's also a book. Many of you will probably know of, heard of, and hopefully will have read the works of Tana French. Tana French grew up in Ireland, Italy, the US, and Malawi.
Wow. And has lived in Dublin since 1990. She trained as an actress at Trinity College, Dublin, and worked in theatre, film and voiceover. She is the author of In the Woods, winner of the Edgar, Anthony, Barry, McCavity and IVCA Clarion Awards, The Likeness, Faithful Place, Broken Harbour, winner of the LA Times Book Prize for Best Mystery Thriller and the Irish Book Award for Best Crime Fiction. Wow. And The Secret Place. She lives in Dublin with her husband and 2 children. So the linking is that 2 of her books have been adapted for television, and they started this week on Sunday on BBC One. The Dublin Murders is the name of the television series, but I'll talk about the book first, which of course will be available to all downloading crime fiction fans on a certain...
On Kobo, yes. They very kindly sponsor our podcast. We're very grateful for them for doing so. If you haven't bought a book from Kobo before, then head over to kobo.com, and if you use the promo code CRIME at the checkout, they'll give you 90% off. And if you follow the link in the show notes for this episode, if you're an existing Kobo customer, you can use the promo code PARTNERS to get 40% off of selected books in the future. And you don't need one of their brilliant e-readers. If you don't want one, you can just read using the free Kobo app on your phone. So there really is no reason not to, really, because you're just getting extraordinarily heavily discounted books that you can read anywhere you like.
Oh, well, there we are. And maybe the first one that you want to do that with is Tana French's Into the Woods, which is the first of the books that has been adapted. And here's the synopsis. When he was 12 years old, Adam Ryan went playing in the woods with his 2 best friends. He never saw them again. Their bodies were never found, and Adam himself was discovered with his back pressed against an oak tree and his shoes filled with blood. He had no memory of what had happened. 20 years on, Rob Ryan, the child who came back, is a detective in the Dublin police force. He's changed his name. No one knows about his past. Then a little girl's body is found at the site of the old tragedy, and Rob is drawn back into the mystery. Knowing that he would be thrown off the case if his past were revealed, Rob takes a fateful decision to keep quiet, but hope that he might also solve the 20-year-old mystery of the woods. So there we are. That is the book, which hopefully you will be downloading even as I speak. But the BBC have made it into a television adaptation, as I say, and the great Lucy Mangan of the Guardian has reviewed it very favourably indeed.
Spoke about this last week, in fact.
You spoke about this?
Yes.
I didn't realise
the Dublin Murders, I think it is, isn't it?
Yes, So have you covered this? So I don't have to cover it
again.
Have to,
well, you can do.
I will cover it again.
We've got 7.5 minutes, you may as well.
Well, we might as well. But I mean, Lucy says there is no guarantee that good original material... This is an interesting point, I think, about adaptations in general. She says in her Guardian column, there is no guarantee that good original material will make for a good adaptation. No more inspiringly will a second-rate work necessarily result in something second-rate in another medium. The Da Vinci Code with Tom Hanks may not have been his finest work, but the film could not have been made worse than its source material. Well, that's what she says. Okay. See also Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey. Her opinion, of course. In TV, perhaps the most consistent proof of the pudding has been in the many successful adaptations of Agatha Christie there have been, most notably and recently by Sarah Phelps, whose rich, dark versions of the murder mysteries have become a much anticipated Christmas treat. They work in part so brilliantly because you can really only add to Christie. She is not Dan Brown, but is primarily a plot machine whose protagonists are ciphers in its service. She is closer to that end of things than the other. Now, Phelps has turned her hand to Dublin Murders, an 8-part adaptation of In the Woods and The Likeness, which is another Tana French novel. 2 very good books by Tana French, an author very much at the other end of the scale. They are the first and best 2 thrillers of her Dublin Murder Squad series and are among the most intricately plotted, beautifully written and psychologically acute examples of the genre that you will find. There is little to be added to such fine-grained work. and much to be lost. Endlessly fascinating convolutions of both ordinary and murderous minds. None of this translates readily to the screen. That is not a fault. It is innate to the two mediums, one primarily visual, the other not. It is not clear yet whether she has found anything to add to French's work or a way to reproduce all that, in careless hands, is in danger of being lost. But if we judge the first episode as is probably fairest, as that of a police murder mystery series, it is a sophisticated and slickly satisfying operation. She goes on to conclude, it is a tasty slice of cut-and-come-again cake, even if the relationship between Cassie and Rob, upon which the credibility of the story turns, is not yet sufficiently close or well-drawn. But it is a fine one to curl up with and enjoy as the nights draw in. And if it stirs in you the urge to devour the French originals too, I promise you will find something even more richly delicious there. So that's Lucy Wang, a big fan of Tana French's novels, and liking the BBC adaptation by the terrific Sarah Phelps. So there we are. That's one I have started to watch, and I have to say I'm enjoying it immensely.
Good. Well, while we're talking about BBC crime that we started to watch, regular listeners to Partners in Crime will know that I am not usually a chap who has his finger on the pulse when it comes to things like this, when it comes to TV, and I tend to watch things on average about 5 years after everybody else. And it is no different when it comes to Peaky Blinders, which I have just started watching. I've watched about 4 episodes of it, I think. So I thought I'd just throw that out there and just let the world know that I am catching up with you. Just very slowly.
Well, that's very interesting. You know, going back to the tour, one of the actors in the company is actually staying at a hotel, boutique hotel. I don't know where it is. It might be Southport, called Peaky Blinders.
Oh.
So it's
in Southport.
I don't know whether it's Southport. It's somewhere, but
near Birmingham.
You'd imagine it to be Birmingham, but
Yeah.
No. So I don't know. Yeah. So I've not seen it, but everyone who has says it's the best thing since Sliced Blinders. So I'm enjoying it. It's a slow burn, but I quite like slow burns. So I'm enjoying it, and I think I'll go and watch some more of that tonight. But in the meantime, we have opened our email inbox, which we are getting much better at doing now. And we saw an email from a nice familiar name from Mike Craven. That's known to readers as M.W. Craven, writer of the Puppet Show and the wonderful Washington Poe books, which I'm absolutely loving at the moment. I'm reading the Puppet Show now. I'm a latecomer to Washington Poe, as I am to everything. And that's a problem when you're a latecomer. You can never really catch up with things because, as things are recommended, you get to them eventually, but you never quite catch up. You're never quite ahead of the game.
No. It's a little bit like when you're chasing after a ball, and every time you get close to it, you kick it a bit further on, and it's.
Yes, you've seen me play football, obviously.
But yes, Mike got in touch to say hello because we mentioned him on the podcast recently. He said thank you very much for the shout out. He very much enjoyed listening to it. He was at Morecambe and Vice last year.
I met him the year before.
Yes, he said his wife and he sat next to you when they had dinner in the hotel.
They certainly did. A charming company they were.
Yes, so he says hello. Unfortunately, he'd already been booked for Capital Crime this year, so he couldn't go. That was on the same weekend, but he's hoping to make it next year and see us there. So hopefully we can grab a chat with him at Morecambe and Vice.
Oh, that would be great.
Next year.
Well, he's a great crime writer, isn't he? And hugely successful. And we had a very, very, very pleasant dinner up at Morecambe last year. Which so hope you guys are very well. And thanks for your email and all power to you. And I have also got a personal thanks to someone who has bought me a nice present up at Morecambe. Yes. I wasn't there to actually accept it in person, and I must apologise actually because it was family dilemmas of health issues that had popped up, which meant I couldn't visit Morecambe this year, which I was very sad about. But I did manage to receive delivered to me this morning before the podcast by my partner, Mr. Croft, a wonderful piece of cake and some wonderful coffee. Yes. Someone who obviously really does listen to the podcast.
Yes.
So thank you, Judith.
Yes, wonderful gifts. And I think it's about it for the week. I think if you do want to get in touch with us, God knows why, but you can. We are hello@partnersincrime.online, and we're at PIC-podcast on Twitter. Or if you want to have a chat with fellow listeners to the podcast and with us as well, then you can find the Partners in Crime group on Facebook, which I think is linked to from our website. If not, note to Moriarty, please enact that.
Oh, that sounds good. And any of you who I'm travelling the country for the next 7 weeks up to Christmas, so if you're in Sheffield or Southport or Newcastle or Bath or Malvern or Guildford or Eastbourne, and make yourself known to me. I'll be at the local theatre doing a play there. I will be reporting back to
they'll make themselves known when the rotten tomatoes bounce off your head.
Well, yes. Well, I'm used to that. Yes, bring all your overripe fruit and veg to the theatre, and So I'm going to be doing a little report about what people read in different parts of the country. Is there what favourite authors are there? If you're in Scotland, are you a pure Rankin and MacDiarmid fan, or if you're in Yorkshire, where I'm going to be popping into independent bookshops and finding out what their bestsellers are, or what their favourite crime fiction books are, and what the people in various parts of the country are reading, and whether it's exactly the same as everyone else, or whether different parts of the country prefer different authors. So that's going to be my little pet project for Partners in Crime over the next 7 weeks, which I'm looking forward to very much indeed. In the meantime, it's very pleasant to be back in the studio.
I was going to say, on which note, we'd better get you up to Sheffield, hadn't we?
Yeah, what's the time? Oh my goodness me. Cheerio everyone, I've got a train to catch.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.